Hello, everyone, and welcome to Episode 3 of Web Development with ASP.NET, brought to you by 3dbuzz.com. Joining us, and of course your host, Mr. Nelson LeKay.
Hey.
Hey, how's it going, Nelson?
All right.
All right. Also, we've got Mr. Zach Parrish.
Hey, how's it going?
You know, just as good as it was a second ago.
Awesome.
Right, and myself, Jason Busby. So now here in the third episode, tonight, we're going to be taking a look at ASP.NET finally. And what I mean by that is we started out with episode number 1 where we walked through the construction of a basic web server.
Sure, literally hit the ground running.
But no talk about ASP.NET. Episode 2 took a look at HTML, XHTML, CSS, just an introductory overview. But again, nothing about ASP.NET. .3. So that brings us to this episode where Nelson will be talking about ASP.NET and getting things set up and some very basic examples just to get things rolling, and then we can take it from there. So with that, Nelson, I shall hand it over to you.
All right. And before we get into ASP.NET, first I have to make a correction. The last episode I claimed that Tim Burton was the guy who invented the World Wide Web, when in fact...
I think it'd be awesome if we did edit these, because right now, while he's saying that, we should put up a picture of Tim Burton.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But it was actually Tim Berners-Lee.
Just show like Jack Skellington over a computer or something.
All right, go ahead and say that name one more time.
Tim Berners-Lee.
Easy slip to make. Because you said like Tim Burton Lee or something, and I remember in the video going like, seriously? But I couldn't remember the name myself, so I just kind of let it go.
Yeah.
I wasn't even sure I heard you properly, so hey. Anyway.
Okay. So yeah, so we're going to be talking about ASP.NET. And, well, what is ASP.NET? It's kind of hard to describe because there's so many different... when people say ASP.NET in casual conversation, they can mean a lot of different things. When I say ASP.NET in this context, I mean it's a platform. So it's a set of libraries and it's a runtime that is available on a web server. And specifically the web server you'll generally be deploying to is IIS.
Okay.
So you saw how in the first video we made a web server. IIS is that, but, actually production code that does a lot of stuff and a lot of stuff really well. ASP.NET is a way to interface with that web server. I guess you could theoretically run ASP.NET on another web server, but generally in production you'll be using IIS. And ASP.NET is a way to, it's a way to interact with it. It's a way for IIS to talk to ASP.NET. It's a way to talk back to IIS. And so that's nice. That's a kind of like sort of abstraction over talking to the server directly. But then they invented something called Web Forms. And ASP.NET Web Forms is an actual application programming framework that's built on top of ASP.NET that provides us with a bunch of tools to make stuff really quickly, but really poorly. Okay. And I don't want to bash all the excellent programmers and applications that have been built with web forms. Newegg is built with web forms. There's a lot of stuff that has been successfully built with web forms. I don't want to suggest that anyone using web forms doesn't know what they're doing, because there are, thousands, hundreds of thousands of developers who are very intelligent using this technology. But I like to believe that one of the reasons why they're using this technology is because there hasn't been any better alternatives until recently. And what Microsoft did in 2008 was release a different web application programming framework for ASP.NET called ASP.NET MVC. And if you're familiar with the MVC pattern, ASP.NET MVC is a framework that uses the MVC pattern to expose itself. And if you've ever worked with Ruby on Rails or PHP frameworks like Symfony or Cake PHP or Kahana, it's a very similar concept, but it's done in C# or VB or C#. It's done, strongly typed. It's done on ASP.NET, and it's a really nice, streamlined, modern framework that doesn't have a lot of cruft or baggage like ASP.NET Web Forms does.
Okay. Now, if you don't mind, I'm going to, again, as we did in the last episode, start tossing questions your way that a beginner may be thinking. Now, going from episode 1 to where we are now in episode 3, in episode 1 we talked about a simple request to a web server where we were asking for some sort of resource, say just a web page, and then on the server side, the server simply just handed that HTML code back, fulfilling the request, and then when we, the client, received it, our browser simply rendered that code up on the screen. So
Yep.
what's the whole thing? I mean, I don't get it. Again, I'm going to play the role of a student. I don't get it. Why do we now need to talk to the server in any way different than what we've already talked about? Don't we just need to ask a server for a page and the server give us a page?
Well, and that's kind of what ASP.NET does. It provides a, and you know what? Let me just fire up a new project.
Okay.
We're going to go into Web, and we're going to select ASP.NET Web Application, and we're just going to call it Web Application 1.
Okay.
Let it spin its wheels for a while, like Visual Studio likes to do. And this is an ASP.NET application, and I can go ahead and hit Control F5, and I can launch it. And what happens is during development, you'll generally be using this little guy right here. This little program came up courtesy of Visual Studio, and he's going to be acting as our web server.
Okay.
So this would be replaced by IIS if you were to deploy to production.
Okay.
So this is the default template. It's really exciting. If we go back to the code, we'll see that, or actually go back to the URL, because I think this is what you're actually asking. Let me grab the port of that and do this in Firefox, actually. That's port 59005. 59005. And, all right, sweet. Okay, now I need to show you something really quickly. Firefox completely fails at IPv6 if it's a local server. So we're going to go into About Config, not About Config.net, About Config, and you'll need to do this if you use Firefox. Search for IPv4, only domains, double-click, and add localhost. And what this does is this makes this run a lot faster.
Cool.
And you have to do this on Firefox. Otherwise, you're going to be waiting 1 to 2 seconds per request. And that has to do with IPv6 not working properly in Firefox. So, yeah, so we have this. We see that we're going to /default.aspx. And we see right here, we have a default.aspx.
Okay.
And so what's happening is we're hitting this. The web server notices that we have this .aspx extension. This is important. It reads this .aspx extension and says, hey, wait, that's an ASPX file. I'm going to go ahead and spool up ASP.NET, and I'm going to ask ASP.NET to deal with this because I know that this extension is configured to be used with ASP.NET.
So what you're saying is the server is not just going to say, okay, well, here's default.aspx. Back to you, client.
No, it's going to notice this .aspx and say, hey, I need to do some additional processing. Let's go ahead and do that with ASP.NET. And I can show that, I can demonstrate that by changing this to default.html.
Okay. So that means by changing that, now the server's just going to say, oh, this is a page I just need to hand back to you to render.
Yeah.
Yep. And we get that, which is not what we want, obviously.
Right.
So having the .aspx is important, and this will come into play when we talk about ASP.NET MVC, because ASP.NET MVC breaks this rule, and it does so in a really interesting way. Okay, so now we have our default back, and know that if I have blank, it automatically goes to default.aspx, just like how we had before it went to index.html, I think.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the default page, and this is an ASPX page. And does that kind of answer the question?
So basically, the big picture is that with it being an ASPX page, the server says, whoa, we need to do some server-side processing.
Yes.
And then what we're going to hand back to the browser that made the request for this ASPX page is going to be renderable HTML.
Exactly. So the result of whatever ASP.NET does is what's going to be dumped into the browser.
So that means we can have code back on the back side that accesses our database with passwords and all sorts of stuff that the client just simply cannot get to because the server is going to process this stuff and, again, just hand HTML back.
Yep.
Okay.
So I can just demonstrate something really fast maybe to drive that point home. And, okay, you're about to see something that is going to plague you as an ASP.NET developer.
But I don't want to be plagued.
Now watch what happens when I put this closing brace.
Did it jump?
It went down. And this will be the most annoying thing that you could imagine. And I am not kidding. It didn't look that bad. Actually, this is the worst damage I've seen this do. This will freak out, especially if you use tabs. Because if you use tabs, Jason used spaces, I use tabs. If you use tabs, it doesn't know what to do.
See, that's why I use spaces.
There you go.
Sounded good.
Justified right there.
But I just want to demonstrate that we can execute arbitrary code in this.
Now, does every line of your code need to be surrounded by the greater than, less than with a % sign?
Yeah, hello world. Every bit of C# code, or rather every bit of code that is defined by this language attribute.
Okay.
If I were to change this to VB, I would be writing VB code. And quick terminology.
But you just can't do a starting and then a closing end of that and then just have loads of code in between?
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
Oh, yeah, you can.
Okay.
Yeah, I was because
I mean, surrounding it on a line-by-line basis is really nice.
So can you delete like the?
Well, no, because you see what I'm doing right here is I'm printing this. You see?
So is that like echoing it back out?
Yes. I'll go over the. Okay, fine. I'll do it right now. Watch this. Okay, this is pre-ASP.NET 4. The ASP.NET 4 introduced this feature, but before then, you always had to use this equal sign. And whenever you have, okay, now I have to introduce the technology. Everything in here is called a code nugget.
Interesting terminology.
Yes. So everything in these little guys are code nuggets. So if you ever have this little equal sign in the front of your code nugget, everything this turns into this will be an expression, and whatever expression this prints out or this results in will be echoed into the browser.
Okay.
And now we see that because we added that B tag in there, B stands for bold, we now get bold. And this is incredibly bad and a huge security risk.
How so?
Imagine if this came from a database and that database was filled by a comment system on your form.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you never want to, or I mean, hell, I can just do this one step further. I mean, I'm just trying to demonstrate that.
Yeah, no, that's great. Just take your time.
And there you go, hitting Control or Alt F or Control Alt, which I'll probably be doing a lot because I'm so used to it. Let me go back to that page that I just. See? So people can do incredible amounts of damage to your site and your security if you let them.
You're saying people can. Okay, so I did misunderstand then, because I was thinking you were getting at if somebody made a mistake on the development of the.
No. I mean, if you have any input that a user can type into and that it saves and sometime in the future renders out.
But I thought all of this code is being parsed out and processed on server side and what's passed back. So if you pass this back and you look at the source HTML, how could somebody modify that
Well, I
code?
mean, we go ahead and look at the source, we'll see that we'll see a bunch of garbage, and I'll get into that in a second. We'll see that right there.
Okay.
And I mean, how could I, as a client user sitting somewhere?
Oh, wait, you're saying that if you were to use the script tags and inject passwords and all that, then that is actually going to be available right here in.
I mean that if let's say we have a forum like 3dbuzz.com.
Okay.
And a user posts a thread, and they put a script in here.
Mm-hmm.
Now they can execute arbitrary JavaScript on every single page.
Mm-hmm.
Or on that particular page that every single user visits, and they can also do whatever style stuff. I mean, imagine if I changed this background to pornography or something, stuff you don't want to do or want to be able to be happening.
But they can only do that on the rendering version of their client, right?
No. When you post a thread, and if you allowed HTML in that thread, anybody who viewed that thread would see that HTML.
Absolutely. That I completely agree with. Okay, so what you're then thinking right now is that this string could have been something that was pulled from a database.
That's what I was. Yeah, that's kind of what I was.
I thought you were just talking about from a developer's point of view.
Oh, okay.
Directly using a literal string and putting the tags in.
No.
I was just having a hard time trying to envision how somebody would go about manipulating that after it's been processed.
Right. You can do it after it's been processed, but I think you might have misheard me or something. I said if this was being pulled from a database that a user could edit.
I did. I misunderstood that. Yeah. My apologies.
Okay, so then to get back to this, you don't want this to happen. And pretty much as a rule of thumb, you never want to ever print out any text that could ever be... I'm
sorry, Nelson's pauses right now is like, ooh, I didn't actually think she'd call me back. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
So you never want to do this. This is bad practice because you might never really know where your variables are coming from, and they could be coming from a form that a user can submit to.
Gotcha.
So that's why in ASP.NET 4, they introduced this.
Okay.
And watch what happens. Boom.
People take things much more serious when it deals with the colon.
Yeah.
So that sigh only gets a 2, Nelson.
Yeah. That was real disdain coming.
It's there. Hang on, I'll get it for you.
Coming at you.
Woo.
Okay, so now we see that instead of the greater than signs, it's actually replacing with these that are called HTML entities. And these are ways to write HTML characters that you wouldn't be able to write, or write characters that you wouldn't normally be able to write due to the fact that the less than symbol is actually a piece of HTML code.
Right.
And that's what this does. This encodes everything that you print with that so that you can't have any security breaches in that way.
Gotcha.
And this is the second most common attack against websites. So that's why I'm bringing it up right now to show you the difference and why you're going to see me doing this almost all the time, and why you might see other people who were before ASP.NET 4 use this.
Gotcha.
Okay, so that was just to demonstrate that we can inject arbitrary C# code into the application or into the website or the web page,
and that it was being processed on the server side.
Exactly, and this is what we're going to be doing a lot of in ASP.NET MVC, but Web Forms, like the name kind of sounds, Web Forms is all about the designer.
Okay.
I might have to go on a tangent right here, but
go for it.
HTML that is not handcraft shouldn't be rendered in my browser ever. And I'm just going to go ahead and say that. If you're an author of HTML and you do it as a job, I strongly encourage you to invest the time to learn HTML and CSS, because it's not just because, some sort of elitist, developer thing. It's because you will gain a huge amount of appreciation for the language and for your content, especially, and your content consumers. So I just want to point that out really fast. Now, if you look closely, you'll see that...
you're just saying that you hate any form of a WYSIWYG editor
fabricated code, or
when it comes to HTML, yes, I don't like WYSIWYGs when it comes to HTML because they generate bad HTML.
Okay.
And they've gone better. They've gone better. This isn't Front Page. This is Visual Studio, and it's pretty nice, to be honest with you. I was really surprised to having used Dreamweaver and Front Page a lot in the past when dealing with other designers who refuse to use anything other than that. I went here and I saw, wow, this really does put in some nice code, but it's still a designer. It'll still somehow manage to screw you up. And it still is entirely possible for any person of any skill set to learn HTML as long as you invest enough time into it.
Okay.
Okay, so if you notice, we only have an H2 and 2 paragraphs. So where's all this stuff coming from? And you notice it's kind of grayed out, right? I can't access it. I can't click on this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at the top, we'll see that we have this master page file, site.master. And you'll also notice this little squiggly. And the squiggly means, or the tilde, means that the virtual web root. And when we're not in IIS, it's difficult to explain what a virtual web root is. But if I go over to a browser, and let's pretend that we have 2 ASP.NET applications deployed to this server. Pretend that I'm in IIS right now. This is the development server. Pretend I'm in IIS. So we have 1-on-1, so one default ASPX. And then we have another application on 2. Inside of both of these applications, whenever you have that tilde, it will reference the virtual directory to that application, which will be this.
Okay.
So it'll always go into the root of the application. In this case, it doesn't matter because the root of the server is the root of our application, and a lot of times that's going to be true. But whenever you reference files through ASP.NET, make sure you use the tilde because that way your site will be able to be deployed to subfolders without problems.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Okay, so site.master. Master page is, well, it just looks exactly like the ASPX files except for it contains our master code. And what a master is it's the framework. It's all the stuff around here. So see now I can edit this stuff?
Gotcha.
This is what holds the framework of the site. And you'll notice that I have this ASP content placeholder. And this guy means stick whoever is calling me, stick whatever they defined for main content right here. And then you'll see right here, we'll have another one up here, head content. So whoever's calling me, stick whatever they define for head content up here. So we go back to default.aspx and we see header content. So everything in between these tags goes in the header.
And don't worry, guys, if there's anybody out there like Mr. Fat Gab that's stressing right now that Nelson's going extremely fast, don't worry. I'm not going to let him get too terribly far into explaining all of this stuff before slowing him way down.
Yeah, I kind of realized I did start to actually go over all of these features, and I really didn't want to.
No, that's okay, because it's just a cursory overview at the
Yeah.
moment, just kind of explaining what it is before we get much deeper. And to explain what it is, you kind of have to
Okay.
demonstrate a little bit.
This stuff goes here. This stuff goes here. And that's because we have this ID main content placeholder ID main content. So that's the master file. So where does, and also really quick note, we have these scripts and we have these styles. I love this about ASP.NET 4. They started shipping jQuery with everything instead of their weird Microsoft JavaScript thing that nobody liked. So we'll get into jQuery in the future. So here's the CSS that's responsible, and I mean it's CSS, and we'll definitely get into that more later. So how do you actually write dynamic content with ASP.NET Web Forms? Remember, we're in Web Forms.
And is there a way to tell for someone who's new to working with this? How do I know I'm in Web Forms?
You know you're in Web Forms when you do not see an MVC application over here. It's kind of hard to describe. You'll see the folder structure for an MVC application is completely different.
Now, is it not a bad idea to go ahead and tell them that you can mix the two together?
Yeah, you can. We'll get into that right when we get to MVC, because I kind of have to explain MVC first before.
Sure, but I just want people to know that it doesn't have to be Web Forms or MVC. It can be a mixture of both.
So let's show some Web Forms, and to do that we need our toolbox. I don't know why that was hidden. Probably because I never use it, because it's only used in designers. So So now we have all these buttons and controls, and we can drag and drop just like WinForms. And then we can do something cool. We can double click, and whoa,
Go right
what
into
just
the
happened?
code.
So yeah, so check this out. We have what's called a code behind. And every single ASP.NET Web Forms ASPX file has these code behinds. And you'll notice that it's a partial class of default. Well, I think that's an underscore right there. Yeah, underscore default. That's because this ASPX file turns into a class at runtime. The code is generated dynamically, turns into a class, and then the C# compiler actually gets invoked the first time you go to a page after an application restart. But then it caches that binary for subsequent requests. So you'll see that we have C# code, and we can do stuff like this, watch. And this will probably look really cool, but I'll explain why this is absolutely terrible in a second. Until I find, let's do a text box. And then whenever they hit the button, let's do button1 dot text equals textbox 1 dot text. And then let's run this. Remember, Control F5. The reason I'm doing Control F5 is because if I did F5, it would launch the debugger. And quick note: the ASP.NET development server is perfectly okay to keep running as you do development. In order to trigger this ASP.NET web development server to start using your newest code, just hit Control-Shift-B, and that will recompile your application. And it'll do two things. It'll recompile your application, and it will kick the development server and say, hey, you got to restart. Another way to tell the web server to restart, and this is what I usually do if I'm editing code and I need the web server to restart for some reason, and I don't want to rebuild my entire application, just go into your web.config, put a space in there, and hit Control-S. The next time you hit your development server, it'll restart.
Gotcha. Very cool.
So we restart, and we'll see our stuff. So we have this button and this text box. And if we do that, whoa, it's amazing.
But you're saying that's bad.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Do you guys have any sort of ideas about what might be happening behind the scenes with this? Because it's awful.
Well, no, I don't.
No, I mean I would just think you're taking a string and using that to replace a button label.
I mean, obviously there's going to be
there's
got to be some JavaScript in there.
No.
No?
No, I can turn off JavaScript. Yeah, check this out. And this is where it gets bad. You can go ahead and just disable JavaScript, refresh. Oh, that kind of spoiled it. Boom.
Okay, so what's going on?
What's going on? You notice how I wrote this in C#? Mm-hmm. You know that C# doesn't run in browsers?
I do know that.
Okay. What is happening when I hit this button? And I can show you with Firebug. I'll full screen this. What is happening when I hit this button is this button is wrapped inside of a form. And this form sends posts data to the server. And when I do this and I hit this, it sends an entire new request to the server with the instructions, call this event handler. And you'll notice that how do I know that what textbox.1.text is unless the browser tells me? Well, it does in the most terrible way. Look at this guy. Or no, not that guy. Where are you, ViewState? It's in ASP.NET hidden. This thing
you couldn't see it.
is the devil. The ViewState essentially contains all of the properties of all of the controls on your current form, and it's I think it's base64. No, I think it's actually encrypted. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's encrypted, but it's stuffed into this hidden input on every page request, and then when you submit, it sends this ViewState back to the server, reconstructs what it thinks is the state of your application, runs your code, runs your C# code, and then renders back this with the new values.
Wow.
And ViewState will get big.
Wow.
It'll get really big. And it also means that, watch this, when I select this and I hit enter, and notice that when I said the word post, and remember when we talked about verbs?
Mm-hmm.
The post means that I'm sending data. So if I hit refresh right now, it says that we detected we're on a post. So we're going to say that we need to repost all the data. So if I hit resend, I'll get the same data.
Mm-hmm.
But watch this. Let's open up this in a new tab. No view state. It's gone. So if your view state gets lost at any point, the state of your form goes away.
Okay.
So yeah, so that's the view state, and I don't particularly like it. And again, I'm not trying to disrespect ASP.NET developers out there. It's just I started ASP.NET development after MVC was already or ASP.NET MVC was already introduced. So that's what I started learning when I started with ASP.NET.
So when you say it's no disrespect to ASP.NET programmers, you're talking about ASP.NET web form developers.
Yeah, I'll be guilty of that too. I do mean web form developers because there are plenty of smart people. There are plenty of great apps. It's just there's so much black magic in web forms. There's serious amounts of quite discomforting amounts of black magic in web forms. And when it doesn't work right, I mean, have fun trying to decipher all of that black magic and figure it out yourself.
Debugging with web forms a lot more difficult?
Under normal circumstances, it shouldn't be. Under extraneous circumstances, it will be, because you can't dig back down into the bowels of web forms like you can do ASP.NET MVC, mainly because ASP.NET MVC is open source. So, yeah.
Gotcha.
So we can do a lot of cool stuff. Maybe I'll just do something maybe a little fun. And just show you, the thing about web forms is web forms is about rapid application development, or RAD. And that's the sort of thing. It's about giving developers a bunch of tools that they can use to create common applications really quickly. So let's go ahead and create a new database. And this isn't going to be about SQL. This isn't going to be about I love this so much. It's like you hit that, then probably enumerates every alphanumeric combination, and then tries to hit every server or something. I don't know. Sounds like something a Microsoft project would do. Let's just call this dev test. And this isn't going to be about SQL Server, but I just want to show you. I want to show you one of the pros of web forms. That's what I want to do. Because you can be fast. You can be really fast with this. As long as your application doesn't fall outside of what Microsoft has decided should be easy, you can be incredibly fast with this.
Gotcha.
After SQL Server decides to get around to doing what I asked it to.
You can be fast. We're not going to say you will be fast. There you go.
Oh, yeah. I realized that I need the named pipe. Let me do this real fast. Let me grab Jason's named pipe. Or I think I can get it down here. I don't do server administration. I'm a programmer, so I haven't spent the time to dig around in these sort of little things. But we can do this. And that just goes ahead and creates a new database for us if it gets around to it. And if you're using Visual Studio 2010, then you will be accustomed to things like this.
Waiting.
Yeah.
Long periods of crazy time.
I mean, I love Visual Studio. I love Microsoft. You might hear me make stabs at Microsoft, but I really love them. And I love Visual Studio. But I actually don't particularly like SQL Server, but that's besides the point. There we go.
Oh, fantastic. Let me do this. Hang on one sec. Let's just pause the video and we'll get it back up here. All right, and we are back. Nelson?
Yeah, the Visual Studio decided to repeatedly crash because I put in Jason's server wrong. So let's go ahead and put it in right and make a database. So I'm going to go ahead and paste that in. Computer name / SQL instance. The default SQL instance for MS SQL Express will be SQL Express. And then just use Windows authentication and create the database. So now we have a database. So let's go ahead and create a table. And again, this isn't going to be really into huge.
Yeah, it's not about MS
SQL.
SQL, but
Yeah. So I don't know. Let's do first name, last name. And then that sounds good. No PK because, I mean, usually I would, but again, this isn't about SQL. Actually, I do want a PK. Let me add that.
go ahead and explain what it is you're talking about.
I'm adding a primary key so I can uniquely identify each row.
Okay.
See, I don't actually use the built-in Visual Studio one. I use the Management Studio Express. Then also, let's drag this up here because PK should be on the top. You will also see this error the first time you try to edit a table in either Visual Studio or Express Management Studio. And basically what it's going to do is it's going to delete this entire table and recreate it with the new information. And you have to explicitly enable this behavior in the Tools menu. So I'll show that really quickly. It's Tools Options. Actually, I might not know where it is in this guy. Know where it is in the Studio Express. But if I remember correctly, it's under Transact SQL. I should have probably read the error message. Database Tools. There we go. Yeah, that's it. And let's take off Prevent Save and Changes that require table recreation. And now I can go ahead and hit Control S, and it'll delete the table and recreate it with the new values. Okay. Notice that it won't delete data inside the table, but it's just something you should never, ever do on a production database. But because we're in development, it's completely acceptable. So now we're going to show table data, and we're going to put in some data. Just, I don't know.
Nelson, you know you could use names that make sense. Jason, Busby, Zach, Parrish, Nelson LeKay. I'm just saying.
Madness. You speak madness.
Okay, so now we have
Nelson's
some table.
one old dude.
He is. Been around for a while.
So now we have two rows in this table. And let's say we want to present them on this page. And I'm just going to delete this. Then I'm going to open up this, and I'm going to ask Zach, in Microsoft's world, how will you display that table data on this page?
What do you mean?
I mean, how do you think that you can display that table data on this page? Like, just take a wild stab.
Something like a spreadsheet.
No. How would you actually accomplish that table?
Oh, I don't have the first clue, dude.
Oh, dude. Okay, this is where ASP.NET Web Forms excels.
Drag, drop.
Oh, okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I totally misunderstood the question. How do you display it? I was like, I don't know. How do you display it? How do you draw it? That's where my brain went.
With text?
Yes, with pixels on the screen.
So let's enable editing and deleting and paging.
Oh, geez, that's nice and easy.
Wow.
And then let's refresh, rebuild, or not refresh, save and rebuild. Find our web server, and this isn't full screen. I'm going to go crazy if it's not. Then come back here and refresh.
Nice.
Huh, now you can edit it to Zach Parrish. No, Zach Parrish. Yeah, that's right.
I love the sigh of death.
Hey, like I spelled
That'll
his last
work.
name.
That'll totally work.
Ha 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 ha. You are now the wise one, like him.
Okay, so that's that. And you'll notice that this actually does use, actually, I'm not sure if they updated this grid to use JavaScript or not. It might actually use JavaScript. Nope, it's using Postback. Okay, so it's not using JavaScript, it's using Postback. And Postback, when I say Postback, I mean the act of posting the view state back into the application.
Right.
And then running it and then rendering a response. So every one of these operations is resulting in a Postback. So that's a way that we can display data really easily. And I guess that's exciting. That's what you want to do. It isn't that web forms.
Go ahead and enable sorting. Watch this. You can just click it, and they're going to be underlined. Yep. And now if he runs it, they
well, not for I deleted all the data.
Yeah, he deleted all the data. Real good, Nelson.
Yeah, way to go, man.
I'm not going to create a add form right now. I'm just going to put in some stuff. And then if we go back here, we get that.
Nice.
And I think this. I just want to say that one of these uses JavaScript, but it doesn't look like any.
No,
of
look
them
at the. No, dude, it's doing a
these are
Postback.
new requests, and that's terrible. I don't know. I don't want to bash too much web forms because I'll be honest, I don't play with it. I don't touch it. And there are specific reasons why I don't touch it, and I might not know all of the power of web forms, but I do know how I like writing applications, and that's having more control. And that's what MVC provides. It doesn't provide this drag and drop stuff, but it provides a lot more control.
So there's no designer when working over in MVC?
Yes and no, and we'll get into that.
Okay, fair enough.
So is there any other questions you had about web forms, Jason or Zach?
No, so basically the whole idea is that you can go in there, visually drag stuff out, and double-click to have it throw in your event handlers and type code in, and then what's taking place behind the scene is when this is, well, I guess this gets compiled, right? How does that work as far as on the server side?
Okay, sweet. So we'll get into that right now. This should only take a second, but I know that I said that it won't. We're actually going to kill this guy to give us more room. And we see a folder with files in it. Find it again. So if I were to deploy this onto an IIS server, or what am I doing? I'm doing this. The files that I unhighlighted are the files that you would deploy to an IIS server when you want to throw this in production. Okay. So I can actually point IIS to this folder and it'll serve it just fine. And these are just what we need. We need all of the ASPX files, the A6 file, the master files, the web.config, and most importantly, the bin folder.
Okay.
And the bin folder is what contains our compiled code. And our compiled code consists of all of the CS files.
And when I bring all that together.
Yeah, and when I hit Control-Shift-B, that's resulting in a new bin, build right there.
Okay.
The ASPX files, however, are done at runtime, meaning the first time I hit an ASPX file after an app reboot, ASP.NET spools up a I don't know what it's called. I can't give you the exact terminology for it.
A worker process?
It spools up a thing that does stuff. And the stuff it does is takes this ASPX file, turns it into C# code, compiles it with the C# compiler, and then runs it.
Okay.
And it actually creates a class. So every one of these ASPX files turns into a class at runtime. And I can actually demonstrate that. This actually might be really cool. You guys might appreciate looking at this. Well, let me think. Let's do this. I think this will do what I want it to do. Certain errors that happen in your program, you'll get this yellow screen of death. And no, this one didn't. This is runtime error. I have to trigger a compile time error. Let's try this one. using a not defined thing. Notice I'm not rebuilding. That's another thing. Do you notice that?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not rebuilding the DLL. I'm just refreshing the browser. And it detects that there was a change, and it does the recompilation. There we go. So on certain types of compiler errors, we actually get to see the compilation source.
Nice.
This is what the ASP.NET turns our ASPX file into, and you can see it turns it into a class that inherits from this, which is defined in your web.config, and it does a bunch of stuff. And you'll notice that your let's throw some more markup in here so I can show that. You'll notice that it turns that into this, into write line statements. So you see the render body content is a delegate that's being passed into this guy. See?
Yeah.
Because that's because the head content being the master file, it's passing in this new object, and then it's passing in a delegate to this generated function, which represents my source code, my HTML source. And then you'll see my not defined right there as whenever it sees a code nugget, it just dumps whatever is in that nugget right there into the class. So does this
Yeah, very
seem
cool. So unlike PHP, where in PHP it's all interpreted at runtime, we actually are dealing with compiled code here when working with ASP.NET.
Yep.
Awesome.
And one quick thing is you'll notice up here in the compilation, the compiler output, you'll see what it's invoked with. All these dudes. You have to remember that the files that this references, you know how you have this references guy up here? The files that this references might not be the same as what your web app references. I think by default it actually does copy whatever is in here into whatever it ultimately compiles this into. But you will run into issues where you have a reference that is being referenced in your view code, but that DLL is not in your bin directory. And if your DLL isn't in your bin directory or your global assembly cache or GAC, then it's going to freak out. And we're going to get into that in a little bit, but or in maybe a few videos.
Yeah, later videos.
And then one last thing, the global.asix. He's kind of your application descriptor. And you see when I double-click on him, he brings me to the global.asix.cs file, which contains the partial class that goes with global.asix. Remember that global.asix is also generated and compiled at runtime. And you know what? Let me in view markup. There we go. You see that has this application code behind equals global.asix.cs inherits web application 1.global.
Okay.
So this is your application. Global.asix is your application. And that's what ASP.NET sees. And then whenever ASP.NET, it tries to load this application. And it loads this application, it sees a reference to web application.global, which is this guy right here, which is an HTTP application. And then it says, okay, where is web application 1.global? We need to find it because we need to run this code. So what it does is it looks in your bin directory, or wrong one, looks in your bin directory and finds this DLL and loads it into memory, and then sees, okay, now we know where web application 1.global is. And if you are wondering why, because normally when you have an ASP or when you have a .NET application, you have bin, then you have debug and release, and then under those you have your DLLs. The reason it's different with the ASP.NET project is because, well, I mean, you're basically running what could possibly be run in a production environment right here in your project on your computer.
Okay.
So the bin folder is significant, and it must be called that.
Gotcha.
All right. Is there any other questions about?
No, that was the. So now I have a good idea about web forms.
So
Yep.
it's
So now you've been talking about MVC.
MVC, yeah.
So
Okay.
I take it MVC is the one you like, because if you don't like it, then I really don't know why we're here to begin with.
I do. I really like ASP.NET MVC. I don't like web forms, and I don't like some parts of ASP.NET, but MVC itself I really do like, and I like working in it, and there's a lot of reasons why I like working in it. Well, I mean, what is ASP.NET MVC? You might have heard about the design pattern MVC, or Model View Controller. And the core principle of that design pattern is that you separate your code into 3 layers. Your view code, which in a web application would be your HTML. Your controller code, which in a web application is what orchestrates the request from the browser. And then think about it like an orchestrator. And then we get into, I'll go back to it in a second. Then we get into the model, which is the rest of your application, the application logic, the business logic, what your application actually performs. And getting back to the controller orchestrates requests from the browser into method invocations onto the model, and then eventually returns with an invocation to the view. So you can think of the controller like the orchestrator.
Okay.
And that's the pattern in a nutshell, and we'll definitely see that in a second. ASP.NET MVC is an MVC framework built by Microsoft, released open source in 2008, and it has been gaining a lot of popularity since then because it's a radically different approach to web development than Web Forms is. And if you've ever been to the website stackoverflow.com, that is an example of a very, very popular website that has been written in ASP.NET MVC. Okay, so to actually get an application going with MVC, or ASP.NET MVC, sorry.
You can say MVC for short,
No.
just in the context of this video, if you like, because I know it's really frustrating for you to have to say ASP.NET MVC. It's a lot of syllables.
Yeah. Anyway, so we have, if you have Visual Studio 2010, you have ASP.NET MVC2. And MVC2, as of, I think a few weeks ago, is now obsolete and has been replaced by ASP.NET MVC3, which is really awesome. It has a lot of new features, and a lot of new features that we'll definitely be using. And so Jason doesn't have ASP.NET MVC3 installed on his computer, so we're going to go ahead and install it. And to do that, you first go to Google and type in, I'll get this guy away from here, just ASP.NET MVC3. There are two, I kind of want to show this to people, just really quickly, that if you go to the Codeplex site, I'll open that up in a new tab, and if you click on MVC, you can download the source code, and you'll notice that it's ASP.NET MVC3 beta, and the current version is the release candidate. They haven't dropped that source code yet, but you can download the source code to this entire application, or this entire framework, and look at it, and it's really interesting to read through. It's also good for debugging. But if you want to download it, just go and head over to this site right here, and we're going to download it through the Web Platform Installer, and that's Microsoft's new little package management thing for downloading stuff onto your computer.
And we can see
really
there.
Ambiguous.
Well, I just wanted to point out we can see release candidate 3. Okay.
Yeah, release candidate 3. So we're going to go ahead and install this. So we're going to save it, then we're going to double click it, and then it's going to probably want to install the Web Platform Installer. So notice it's not installing ASP.NET MVC3, it's installing the Web Platform Installer, which will install ASP.NET MVC3, which is a really Microsoft way of doing things.
Nicely put. But
the WebPI, or Web Platform Installer, it's pretty cool. There's some stuff in here that is cool to look at. Oh, hey, look, the new version automatically installs, or goes to this. In the older versions, you had to manually hunt down ASP.NET MVC3 and select it and download it, and it was kind of a pain, but it's kind of nice to see they clean that up a bit. So this is going to install. And if this gets too long, Jason, would you mind doing a splice here or something? Because it does, at least on my machine, it took a few minutes to get this installed, mainly because of the new tooling. By tooling, I mean plugins and extensions to Visual Studio. Decided to take a little bit of time. I guess we'll see how long it takes here. But hopefully it won't be too bad.
Yeah, we'll just give it another second. I mean, if I need to, I can just pause the recording. I mean, while this thing is installing, is there anything that you want to talk about that could be useful to our viewers?
Well, first of all, you probably want to make sure Visual Studio is closed as you do this.
He said as he closed Visual Studio.
Yeah, ASP.NET MVC3 is interesting because you saw how with Web Forms there was a lot of black magic and a lot of abstraction. And Microsoft tried to make web development feel like WinForms development with the designer and the drag and drop and the double click to add the actions and all that stuff. The problem is that doesn't translate well into the web because web requests are stateless. The only information that you have to go on when processing a request is what the user put into their address bar and what they submitted as part of the form.
Right.
And so with ASP.NET Web Forms, reconstructing that state on a per-request basis, it does lend itself to performance issues. It does lend itself to bizarre ViewState issues. And the way MVC is different is that every request gets handled by code that you explicitly write. So instead of getting a nice form where you can drag and drop stuff and magically wire up this thing together, you get a request response lifecycle that is actually more representative of HTTP itself. So when your web server that's configured with ASP.NET MVC gets hit, it spools up your site, finds the piece of code it needs to start executing, kind of like a main function, and then executes it, and that's all it does.
Okay.
Like literally. There's some things like, obviously, they built in what's called a view engine into it, where you can, one line of code instruct the execution to go into a actual HTML type file, either an ASPX file or a Razer file, which is a CSHTML and .VB-HTML. And we'll definitely get into Razer. I love Razer. There's also other view engines. Because you saw with ASP.NET Web Forms, there was just that one sort of syntax, those code nuggets and the for each loop and all that stuff, or those little putting C# into that form, wrapping it in that way. That's one way to do it. But with ASP.NET MVC, we can do a lot more with views, and views being the HTML that's rendered. And while this guy's installing, let's go ahead and look at a few different ways to write HTML in MVC. So the Spark View Engine. This is a really cool one. Basically, instead of writing those code nuggets like you saw before, you get this really nice syntax where C# gets dumped in at really specific areas. Like, for example, you read this as print this UL if this piece of C# code evaluates to true. Or for each item in this C# expression, print this li with P being inserted for the current item.
Nice.
And the Spark View Engine, it's really neat. I really like it. The next kind of big-ish view engine is called NHAML, and this is based off the Ruby on Rails project called HAML. And unfortunately, I haven't played with this guy since I think I played with this guy in February of this year. So that was in ASP.NET MVC timeframes, February of this year is a very long time ago. And I'm not sure if they've upgraded to work with .NET 4. But if you want to look at some of the awesome syntax that you get with Haml, look at that. I mean,
That's very cool. Yeah.
What I'm saying is you have more options than just writing code like this. You have a lot more options, and you can use and Haml. Hopefully, I'm not sure if they've upgraded to 4 yet. The reason I haven't checked is because ASP.NET MVC introduced a different view engine. In addition to the old code nuggety ASPX files, we now have, as part of ASP.NET MVC and as part of what we'll be seeing soon, I can show it to you right now. Go ahead and hit finish, and you see that there's a lot of stuff. We can install applications, we can configure IIS for us, we can install the web matrix, which we might touch on a little bit. It's kind of a neat little thing that is kind of cool, but we'll get out of this for now and launch Visual Studio and show you ASP.NET MVC. So you guys have any questions about these different view engines?
Not yet. Not without actually getting to see one in use. I mean, I can see where it simplifies how much code you have to write.
Exactly.
Just summarize the concept of a view engine one more time.
The concept of a view engine is that a view engine is responsible for printing the end result of what gets sent to the browser. It's not responsible for performing logic or doing things or sending emails or reading from databases or anything like that. That's the model. I don't know why I reopened that. The view engine is responsible for printing the HTML, and we can do it in a bunch of different ways, which we'll see.
Okay, hang on before you click that. But then view engines are being made by different development teams because it's a plug-and-play type module or component of the project?
ASP.NET MVC is extremely modular, especially with 3, and we can swap out whatever we want, and it's quite amazing.
Okay.
So,
are these view engines all free that are being developed right now?
All the ones I've seen.
Okay.
Actually, there was this really cool view engine. I just want to say this because it's awesome. This really cool view engine. I can't remember the name, so I can't bring it up. But imagine if you write an HTML document. Then you write another document that looks like CSS, but instead selects elements with the selectors and then dumps data into them.
Interesting.
Wow.
It wasn't a production-ready thing. It was this thing this guy was playing with, but it was such a cool concept, almost to the point where I want to write my own and use it. But so we're going to hit a ASP.NET MVC 3 web application and launch it, and we'll get a little dialogue. And we can start with an empty or internet application. I'm going to start with empty.
You sure? Because you started with a full application with the other one.
Okay. I'll start it with this, and then I'll create another one with empty once we go over it a little bit. And now we have 2 view engines, the ASPX and the Razer. And I'm actually going to do ASPX in this case because I don't want to freak everyone out too much. But the next application we create will be an empty one with Razer.
Okay.
And we can also create a unit test project, which
nice.
It's beyond the scope right now.
Sure.
So, well, what do we get?
New folder structure.
Yeah, right off the top of the bat, or
close enough.
Off the top of my head.
just
right
go
off
with
the
it.
bat, off the top of my head.
Yeah.
What do you see that's different other than code resharper is telling me to delete?
That it looks like we are just in a regular C# application.
Exactly. It's honestly, this is so much more beautiful.
It's just nice and clean as opposed to before it was very cryptic looking, just, kind of a mix of...
Yeah, it still had that kind of hybridized web look.
Yeah, exactly.
And you'll see, because we're using the ASPX view engine, when we click into these, we'll see some similarities, but I'll go over the differences really fast when we get into those. The first thing is these are the controllers. So we have the account controller and the home controller. The account controller was generated for us. It does a bunch of stuff we don't care about. Specifically, it uses the built-in ASP.NET membership provider interface, which I don't particularly like, and I guess you know how snobby I am about things. So we have this, And also this uses dynamic typing in this case, but we're not going to be using that when we get into stuff. But, I mean, dynamic typing we should probably go over in a Nelson's Corner at some point. So we have a controller, and a controller is just a class that inherits from controller. And every controller has actions. And an action is defined as every public method that returns an action result. And if I run this, we'll notice a few really, really awesome things.
Hang on one second.
Stealing my Windows, Jason?
I'm going to...
Sort of.
Sort of, yes.
Well, actually, let me
I'm going to call out... Yeah, I was just simply going to give it back to you over here, and you can just paste the address in.
Okay. You have it on the clipboard?
Should be.
Okay, sweet. There have been so many clipboard accidents that I've been a part of that's not even funny.
I don't doubt that for a minute. I'll bet most of them were pretty awesome, too.
No, they're terrible. Remember that time I accidentally posted that super secret URL into the IRC?
I heard about that.
Yeah.
Check me out. Yeah, but so we're going to do that and hit enter, and we get the MVC application. Now, you want to see something cool? There is no default.aspx. And if I go to about, look at the URL.
So if you wanted to give somebody the location to go to, you're not going to give them a specific file.
Well, I mean, you're going to give them a URL, but it's not going to map.
Not with a file resource at the very end of the URL, though.
Yeah, without the ASPX.
Yeah.
And how this is possible, it's really, really, really cool, and I like it a lot. Essentially, what ASP.NET MVC says is it says IIS or development server, whichever I'm running on, any request that comes in, give to me, and if I want to handle it, I'll handle it. Otherwise, do your own thing. So you saw previously how it had to have a .aspx before the web server said, oh, this is an ASPX file. We need to tell ASP.NET about it. With ASP.NET MVC, ASP.NET MVC says, tell me everything, and I'll choose what to respond with and what to let you respond with.
Okay.
And it does that through what's called the routing engine. And the routing engine it's not as much of a black box as this one method makes it out to be. It's a really interactive, robust way to define routes, and we'll get into those definitely in the future. But when we click on global.asix, remember, global.asix is akin to the program class of a console application.
Okay.
This is the application class that is instantiated when the web application starts. And this is where we do all of our initialization code.
Gotcha.
So you'll notice register routes is invoked from application start. So whenever the application is started, register routes gets invoked, which uses the route collection, which is found through the route table.routes static property. And when you call, routes has a lot of cool things that it lets you do, mainly map route and ignore route. And ignore route, I mean, does just what it sounds like it does. It takes this pattern and says, I'm MVC and I will not have anything to do with any URL that matches this pattern. When you call map route, there's a lot going on right here. And, okay, so we have the route name. Every route has a unique name that we can reference later. Those are called named routes. Then we have the URL. So this is the URL that this route matches. And you notice that it just has these little token guys in here. Mm-hmm. Watch what happens when I do this. And then I'm going to hit Control-Shift-B, which will recompile my application. And in recompiling my application, refresh will result in an app reboot. And the app reboot will reload this map route with our new values. And so you notice that this URL, this /URL or empty URL, no longer matches any of these routes, in this case, one route, unless we do this. So now it matches.
Nice.
Cool.
And what you see here are these tokens, and I'm going to call them URL parameters. I'm pretty sure that's what they're called, and well, there's a static class right there. So these URL parameters are tokens or variables that will be matched by your route and stuffed it back into ASP.NET MVC. So you kind of see where I'm going with that?
Kind of dynamically updating the folder structure? Or kind of where we're headed with the browser?
There is no folder structure.
Okay.
And that's a cool thing. So this controller gets yanked out of the first argument. So if I recompile and refresh, what's happening now is the reason it's a 404 is because it's matching saying, hey, controller's there. That's where controller goes. So I'm going to pull that variable out of this place. And I'm going to use it to find the controller I have to talk to. So right now it's looking for the black controller, which doesn't exist. So if we do the home controller, which does exist, you see right there, and hit enter, we'll get a page. And the reason why we get a page is because of these defaults right here. So this is saying if no controller is supplied, use home. If no action is defined, use index. And ID is optional. So this matches the home controller. Controller becomes home, which is the same as the default. This matches the index action. Remember, actions are public methods on the controller class. So index is an action. And then when I hit enter, the routing engine looks at this this text and matches it with a pattern with all these routes that are defined, in which case right now there's just one, and then says that, okay, if this were to match, which currently it does, match controller to the first one, action to the next one, and ID to, well, one that doesn't exist. And then it's using these controller action names to find out what it needs to invoke when the request happens.
Okay.
So are you guys?
Yeah, I'm following you.
For the most part.
Do you have any questions about the routing engine?
I'm not quite sure I see the end result of it yet, but it's probably just because my head is so used to demanding that you have some sort of a folder structure that we're browsing on the system, which apparently we don't have, so I guess we're just navigating to different parts of an application.
Yep, or different parts of the application, I guess you could say. But watch this. What if I wanted to have URL like this? Now, that would be great for search engine optimization, and it's also really legible.
Now, what you'd want to do, though, is you're going to end up building a route for that that's going to map it over to a function within a controller that'll handle that request.
Exactly.
Okay.
It'll see the route that this would look like would be /form name /thread, the literal word thread, /thread name. And then it would see that. It would match this because it sees there's a literal here, a variable here, a literal here, and a variable here, and they all kind of come together. So then it'll yank the lounge into this variable, and it'll yank hey there into this variable. And then it'll invoke whichever controller and action that I decide to send it to with these parameters.
Well, you say it's so awesome. This is very intriguing to me. Do it. Set a new map up, and can you set a method up that's just going to give us a basic page that says you're on the form, or even uses one of the parameters to say what thread we're in?
Yeah. I don't even need the, as you'll see, I don't even need the view engines for that. Thread, and it's going to be form name, thread. Should have probably just copied and pasted that. Thread name, and then we don't need any defaults or namespaces or any of that. We'll go into the other parameters soon, but this is all you need. Or no, this isn't all you need. We do need defaults because the magical tokens controller and action aren't part of our route, so we need to specify them in our defaults. And I'm going to break it like that. And you notice the syntax, which you might not be familiar with, Zach. You see the new and then the curly braces. We'll get into this in Nelson's Corner episode, but think of this as an anonymous, well, it is an anonymous type.
Okay.
And so this is an anonymous class that we're creating, and the resulting object has these properties with these values.
Okay.
So that's just a quick overview of that syntax. So we'll say controller equals forum, action equals thread. And then we're going to create that controller, right-click, add, and then, hey, there's a new controller there because we're working in an MVC project. We're going to call this forum. And we can automatically generate some stuff that we don't want to do right now. And we hit add, and we get a new class.
Now, is this a naming convention that must be followed, meaning the name plus the word controller?
Yes.
Okay.
This is a convention. It also must be under this namespace unless you override the defaults, which you can do.
Fair enough.
And now this is gonna probably blow your mind, Jason. Now I'm going to return content, and content is a function part of the controller class that returns an action result that just represents whatever content in the form of a string that I pass in.
Okay.
We're going to say
Yeah, I already see where it's going. Very nice.
okay, and if I recompile and hit enter, we get an error, and that's because I started the route with the slash. Because I actually make this mistake. I've made this mistake so many times in my development. Just don't start the routes with the slash. I like to because, you know, in my mind, that's where it all starts with the slash, but MVC does not like that.
Oh, nice.
That's awesome. And helps to give me a much better picture. Wow.
Yep.
Yes, I totally dig that.
Yeah, it's quite amazing. And like you would do in a real application, you would take this, what's called a slug, or a unique identifier that's publicly known kind of thing, or readable is kind of the definition of a slug. It's usually used in SEO purposes in this instance. So you'll take the slug and match it against the database, find the lounge form object, and then do its thing.
Wow.
And it's pretty amazing. But let's say we want. So at this point, are you guys comfortable with the idea of routing?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think so.
Makes complete sense. I actually really like it.
Okay, let's get into the view engine.
Okay.
So first, I'll show you. I'll actually expand on this in a few minutes here, but I'll start off with the home controller because it's already made. When we return the view returns an action result that will render a view using the view engine, and we can override which view it uses with these overloads.
Okay.
Like, view name, and I think that's the only one. I think you could also specify a master name, right? Yeah. And that, by convention, it goes under the views folder. And then it goes under the controller name. Shared, by the way, is not a controller. It is just a convention for stuff that's used by everything, kind of. So we go into home, and then we see each action. Each action has an ASPX file. These are the views.
Okay, and those are they always need to match the method name, which is the action.
By default, you can override the
if you were to supply your own view name, etc.
Exactly.
But if you were not, and just leave it as defaults here, it has to match the method name.
Yep. And, well, we see pretty much exactly what we saw before.
Okay.
This is pretty much the same thing. In fact, we can put ASP.NET Web Forms controls here. They just won't work properly, or at least almost all of them won't work properly, because we don't have a ViewState.
Okay.
You'll notice that the master page file is our site.master, and this will look like it did before. It also, the one thing that you'll notice is that the inherits, because remember, ASPX files and master files are classes. So this inherits literally means the class that gets generated, inherits from this.
Right.
In this case, it's System Web MVC ViewMaster Page.
Which we were getting a taste of that back when you demonstrated the compiler error when you put the not defined in.
Yeah. And then this one does view page.
Yep. Very cool.
Also, yeah, never mind. Yeah, it does include jQuery as well. It's just commented out because for whatever reason, I guess. So yeah, so this is, just normal HTML. And you'll see this HTML dot. And this HTML dot you will be using a lot of. And it's called the helper, the HTML helper. And if any of you guys have Ruby on Rails experience, you'll know the term helper, and it's the same concept. If we were to fire up IntelliSense on this guy, there you go.
It's nice when you have actual text on the keys, isn't it, Nelson? Oh, that's right. You don't.
Oh.
I'm getting better.
Yes, you are. You are.
Okay, so we have a bunch of stuff that we can do. And these are just helpers. These are reusable functions that we can use.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll notice something cool. These are all extension methods.
Mm-hmm.
So if I wanted to add, let's say, my own helper, and I want to bring this example back to reality before I get too far away from the stuff. But
They're already a static class that you can add these to, or are you just going to make your own?
I'm just going to make my own.
Gotcha.
But you'll see something interesting that comes into the what I've been saying before about stuff, about the compilation.
Not a mono behavior. Thought he was about to double click that.
Yeah.
Yeah, why don't I just do that? Alt insert works on folders too. Did you know that, Jason?
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, I just found this out today. And if you look at the little accelerator keys, guys,
Yeah, very awesome.
I can just hit L and I make a class.
Nice.
I just never used that. I will be now. That's awesome.
I think it's to put focus on the Solution Explorer. I think it's Control Alt L. Yep.
Yep, very nice.
So you just use Control Alt L, then Alt insert, and then you're good. So I'll do the public stack string helpers, and then this is I can go so in depth with all this stuff, but I'm just going to introduce this because it's important. HTML string, and I'll show you why that's important.
Are you doing something with your mic?
Talking to me?
Yeah.
Yeah, you.
I don't think so.
It sounded like a cord was hitting it or something.
It might have been.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a cord.
Aha.
Okay. So unfortunately, this gets into a bunch of stuff. You'll notice I'm using a generic helper object. And that's not important right now. Ignore the fact that that's generic.
You've got your this and that in there.
I know. It makes it so much more fun to read. It's like a comic routine.
Because this is that.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to return a new HTML string.
Or is it that is a type of this?
Ooh.
You know what?
No.
Param is a word. Okay, so this is our nice little helper, and now we can invoke it, like right here, by doing this. Bam. And you'll notice this doesn't work. And do you catch why?
Are you using the class?
No.
Well, jump back over and take a look at the thing. And you're taking in parameters.
One quick second. I have to. Yeah. Okay. Sweet.
But you're expecting some parameters.
Well, yeah, I am. But there's another reason why this isn't working. I'll make that go away because that just totally ruined it. Thanks, you, Sharper. I was totally gonna make Jason and Zach have to work for this answer, but it totally. Yeah. Okay. The problem is that this is an extension method. So whichever namespace this extension method is in has to be included in the generated output.
And surprisingly enough, you have to include those parameters since you said they're not optional parameters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we get import namespace helpers. And we can take this one step further. And I'm not going to touch web.config besides this one instance. And I'm going to use a different web.config. We're gonna talk a lot about web.config. I'm going to basically say add that namespace to every single view. Which is a really, really, really nice feature when you're working with helpers.
Now, I noticed that was all up underneath Razer.
Yeah, you can ignore that.
Okay.
Just disregard that. That doesn't matter.
You're right.
Just
See,
wondering.
the thing is, since Razer came out, in fact, since the preview 1 of MVC3 came out, I have not used the Web Forms view engine. Let me go find his little guy. He doesn't have one, so let's make one. No, it's under Pages. Namespaces. Don't be afraid of this file, and we're going to make everyone no longer afraid of these files, because I was terrified of these files before I started doing a lot of development. And we will go in depth over these guys. For now, if you add the namespaces to the Pages element and add namespace, all of these guys will be added to all of your views implicitly. And we see that by this not being represented. So let's go ahead and do a build. And
Very
now
nice.
we do. Okay, so those are extension methods on the HTML, and we refresh, and we'll see our param. And it's in an H1. Notice how it's in an H1, but wait a sec, I'm using the colon. So what's going on? You'll notice that I'm using an HTML string. I'm returning an HTML string. If I were to return a normal string...
Then it would just come out literally.
Yep.
Then you'd get that converted over.
Yeah.
And after we compile, this will really upset you as you do ASP.NET MVC development when you have to recompile and when you don't. Remember, if you edit anything that is not a view file, you will have to recompile.
Yeah, because all the CS files are compiled.
Yep. And now we get the literal of that.
Gotcha.
Very nice.
Remember that use the HTML string when you want to print HTML with your helper.
But then, now correct me if I'm wrong, but now we're back to make sure you're very careful, because if that was actually something coming from a database that somebody else could have injected HTML code in that was malicious, you could be looking at the same problem that you had back over in Web Forms, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
But oftentimes helpers will always print HTML because that's kind of what they do. So that's why it's important to know that in this case. So we have this, and we have, I mean, at this point, yeah, let's go ahead and create a new view for a thread page, and then let's ditch this example and look at Razer. Why did I put in string? Because I saw that string and then another word, and then I thought it was controller.
Yeah, so here we won't form.
Yeah. And we'll add a new view. And this is going to be a thread view. And it's going to have a master page, and we're going to use the ASPX view engine. And so now if we go back to our thread page, right over here, this actually, yeah, this works. So now we have thread. This is now being printed here. Now wait a sec, how do we get data from the controller into the view? And there's two ways to do it. One way which you shouldn't use and one way which you should use. ViewData should be ignored, or not ignored, but try not to use ViewData unless you absolutely have to. But a quick summary is that ViewData...
So ViewData is a dictionary that the view actually has access to?
It's actually oh, you are right in saying that, but they introduced a better one with dynamic typing called ViewModel. They introduced this in MVC3 long after I used this construct.
Gotcha.
Because I used something different, so I wasn't familiar with that particular guy. So ViewModel.forum name equals forum name. And now if we go into our view, we'll be able to print out view model or ViewData, or yeah, ViewData. Oh, there's a dynamic one. Like I said, this was a new feature, so don't hate me for not knowing exactly what I'm looking at. Let me get back into my home. I am in my home, so that means view.message. Okay, so it's view.message, and I'm in the wrong view file. Yeah, thanks. Yeah. Okay, so we're doing model dot, or view dot, sorry. View dot forum name recompiled because we edited the controller. Not because we added the view, because we added the controller. And then refresh, and we'll get a nice the lounge.
Nice.
Very cool.
Now, here's how you should.
Because this was how you shouldn't usually do it.
I don't want to say you can never ever use this, because it's useful and you'll need it, and it's great to know. I actually haven't needed it in any recent projects because I always do what I'm about to show you.
Mm-hmm.
But so just if you don't need to, don't use this. And the reason why is because it's not strongly typed. Because it's dynamic.
Right.
We could type in whatever we want, and we're not guaranteed at compile time that what we typed in is correct.
Mm-hmm.
So now we get to talk about strongly typed views, and I will always use strongly typed views. Or I don't want to say always, but pretty much all the time.
Always, just not always.
No, I always will do it.
Yeah.
No, I can't say always, but I never won't do it.
Gotcha.
Okay, so you'll see that this takes an object model. And let's pass in a model and see what happens. So we pass in a form name as our model, as our view model. And this isn't the model, which is, I hate that they say the word model in here and not view model, because it really should say view model, which is a different concept than your model. Does that make sense?
Mostly.
Okay, so we go into thread, and we see that inherits.
You're not getting into the difference between data and business logic, are you?
No.
No, I'm not asking Nelson.
No, I kind of am. We're talking about data.
I know that's
Okay.
But that's what I was getting at when you were. I was just kind of filling in what you didn't say there with model
Right,
and
okay.
the difference between data and business logic.
You'll see that there's this inherits a view page with a generic type dynamic. This generic type is going to be the type of the model that's passed in. So right now it's dynamic and it'll work with anything. That's just like if we put an object, it'll work with anything. But we passed in over here a string. So we're going to say string. And you'll notice something awesome when we bring up code completion in a second, because we'll delete this because it's no longer valid. Look at this. The model attribute is now a string.
Nice.
Yeah,
That
very
type
cool.
over here correlates to, or this type right here, correlates to whatever you put here. The data that this contains correlates to whatever you pass into the view function.
Very nice.
And so if we do this, we get the same result, which we don't because I forgot to recompile. And we don't again because the reason this isn't working is because we're actually using a different overload. We're using the string view name. We have to cast this into an object to hit the right overload that we want, because we want this overload, not the string overload.
Okay.
Because the string overload lets us override the view name. I actually don't even use strings as my model. I use custom view model classes, which I'll show you how to create in a quick second here. So now we have the lounge.
Nice.
Gotcha.
But this is great, but we want to pass in two things. We want to pass in the form name and the thread name. And we want to do this on pretty much every single view that we render.
Mm-hmm.
So why not start an awesome convention that I've started in my own code, where we create a folder called ViewModels. Did you see where this is going, Jason?
Oh yeah, I do.
And we're going to, this is the one place where I have broken my class naming convention, and I did it on purpose. Why am I doing this? Hold on. Alt insert. L. Okay. So I do controller name _ action name. And it looks ugly, but I always tell ReSharper to go away. Okay. So that's what I use for my view models, and this clearly denotes that's a view model. Another acceptable convention would be like this, or view model or something, but I just find that this is less typing.
Or it would absolutely kill you to work in Objective-C.
I remember hearing you complain about that.
Well, when I was first learning it, getting my head wrapped around it, but when you start writing out methods there, especially methods that take in parameters and the way that's written out, and it's very verbose, and you end up with
Like
a method
47-mile
that
line.
Yeah, it's
name.
like, exactly.
Yeah.
It's like we just use 600 characters.
This is the method that is going to collect all of our data and put it into this format.
Colon, and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
It's a neat language, though. Okay, continue.
So, and I'm going to, not surprisingly, fill this up with the two things that my view needs. My forum name and my forum, or my thread name. And these could be complex objects. They could be objects from your database. They could be anything you want them to be. You can fill this up with whatever you want. The important thing is that there's one view model per view. And this is the contract that the controller has to fulfill in order for it to render this view. It has to pass in this data. And this is a strongly typed way of enforcing that.
Hey, Nelson, can I get you to do me a favor?
Yeah.
That bottle cap, throw it.
Oh, yeah.
Throw it away from you. Throw it far.
Or the only way you can get it is to actually get up and walk away from the recording station.
I totally wasn't.
Sorry,
I idly played in a range.
To let our viewers in on the inside joke, before recording, I told Nelson to put that out of arm's length. So,
Which he failed at, clearly.
No,
Or he
I
picked it back up.
I brought I brought another water bottle.
Gotcha.
So, yeah, when we had that little problem.
Awesome.
So,
I just picture like a basket somewhere nearby that's full of bottle caps so he can pick up another one.
oh, no, it's worse.
oh boy.
I'll take a picture of it sometimes. Anyway, so we have this view model, and we have one view model per action. And this is the contract that the controller has to fulfill in order to render this view. So we'll go back into our controller and say, we're going to pass in, or actually, no, we're going to keep it like this. And then we're going to come into our view and say, we want a, actually, hold on. If I do this, it won't work because I don't have the namespace imported.
Okay.
But I can go ahead and add that namespace in here really quickly, so I don't have to import that namespace on a per item basis.
And it's just going to work?
Yep. So now we have this, and now this view accepts a form thread, not a string. So what happens when we print it? Also, this won't work because model is now a form thread. So we need to go to form name.
That's what I needed to see right there.
Oh, okay.
Because I was like, how does it even know what it's going the content's going to be?
So now watch this. We're going to get a huge error, probably a yellow screen of death. Yep.
Woo.
Model passed into the. I hate how it says this dictionary. I just this error when I see it, like my mind. The only reason I know what it says is because I've read this like 2 billion times, but my mind goes to something completely different when it says that. Just like the worst worded error ever. But anyway, we get that error is because we're passing in a string. And that's not a view model.
No, it's not.
Let's pass in the view model and see what happens. So we have, that was on my clipboard for some reason. So we'll pass in a view model, and I'll unindent all of this.
Oh, that's going to make so much more sense now. And please tell me this is just going to work. Except for your... Oh, let's just finish all this out. That makes actually that should just work. Now let's go back over to your view.
This view
and
and
because we're just telling all of that makes
form name, right?
That all makes complete sense because a second ago when you were saying it's just going to work, I was here. Then when you said, all right, we just need to add the dot forum name, I was thinking, all right, well, it's going to make some sort of association. But I was just wondering, how in the heck is it going to generate this instance of the class?
Yeah.
But now it makes complete sense. Yeah, in fact, I like it.
Oh, yeah, it's great. So we refresh, and
that
it'll work as exactly as we expected. So now we have URL parameters being piped in through our controller, and our controller can act on the model to transform this data into something else, like a database call or the current replies in this thread. Then it passes that data into the view through the view model, and then the view prints it.
Yeah, because backing back up to what you said earlier, now we get that form name in, which let's say that instead of a form name, it's a form ID, and then we get what thread, instead of saying it's a thread name, let's just say it's a thread ID, and now we can query that thread ID. The data that we get back, we could then put it into our view model, however we want to express that information back out, and then pump it over to the view to be shown. Yeah, that all makes complete sense.
Let me just, for anybody who can't maybe visualize this, I'm gonna show a for each loop with a strongly typed object really quickly. This actually should go to my model. I'm going to do that right now. So we have now an example of actually using some of our model objects inside of our view model. And we'll add that namespace. And then we'll go into the form controller. And just to visualize this more, I'm going to actually create a new method. I'm just going to say get replies from database for thread name. Then I'm going to create this method. And of course, resharper is awesome. Figures out everything I need. So then we need to return a new instance of a reply array. So we're going to use this implicit array constructor syntax if resharper can stop this whole formatting mess. And I don't even know why that happened, but there we go. It's closer, but it's going to do that. And the reason is because it's actually invalid. So let me make this valid real fast so that resharper has an easier time of not screwing with me.
Give them a 9.8 on that one.
Yeah.
There we go. So now we have a bunch of spaces. So title.
Hey there.
Hey there.
It's a very special
This is a
forum.
great forum. I need to find this forum and sign up for it today.
Okay, so do you understand this so far, Zach?
Yes, I do.
Of what's going on?
Yes.
So now we're going to go into the thread, and we're going to do a for each loop.
Which will just call on each one of those replies.
Yep. Of course, I'm not in a UL. Sorry, this is taking.
No, this is fine. I'm sure the viewers love it too. They can always fast forward or stop. This is good stuff.
Or rewind.
I really do type faster in real life. I don't know. Something about this this connection is just throwing my sort of intuition.
I was just going to say something about that keyboard that has no numbers and letters on it, but that's okay.
You know, I mean, that might have something to do with it, but I don't want to go there. I know he's really attached to that keyboard.
No, it is the lag. You know, there's only over 2,000 miles between us. Well, not quite, but close.
Okay, so there's a more complicated example that actually shows some cool stuff.
And an error.
Yeah, we get an error because reply is private, whereas this is, or actually I think the default is internal. So let's make that public, and now it'll compile. So now if we come back here, we get exactly what we should expect.
Wow. Again, best forum ever.
That's awesome.
Okay, so I mean, how are you liking this? I mean, I know Jason sounds pretty excited, but
oh yeah, screw Zach. This is awesome.
It is awesome. It's a really, really different way to think about producing a web page. And
yeah,
so
but I can see where they're going with this. I like it.
And because I'm not a completely native C# programmer, it's taken me a little bit longer to completely wrap my head around. But I can already see the flexibility of it.
Right. And so let's really quickly, before I guess we probably need to wrap this up eventually.
It's been one heck of an introduction, that's for sure.
Yeah, this could have easily been like 5 videos.
No, this is good stuff, man.
We're going to look at Razer. So you saw the ASPX views, and those were sort of legacy, cruft from Web Forms, the Web Forms age. So let's look at Razer, and Razer was introduced as of MVC3. It was available as part of the preview. And all you have to do is select Razer, and I'm going to select an empty application, so I don't get into that stuff.
But it looks so nice.
Yep. You'll notice that the master dot or whatever dot master becomes _layout.shhtml or CSHTML.
No. Say that again. Say that again.
I only say
Just
it
say
as
it.
a joke.
Just say it, please.
One of my shhtml.
Thank you.
I only say it as a joke to bug one of my coworkers. So
you almost started giggling like Peter Griffin.
That was great.
I'm sorry. It's kind of this internal joke at my work. So yeah.
It's now an internal joke here. That was pretty funny.
Okay, so we have this this layout, and we're gonna turn on line numbers. Or no, never mind. Whatever. So we have and notice that the HTML5 doc type, because this is new and awesome. So you'll notice a lot of different things about this. And I guess the biggest thing to notice is that, where's all the code nuggets? Where's my inherits? Where's all that stuff? What's going on?
Yeah, now we're looking much more like just a regular HTML5 document.
Oh, yeah. The first thing to note is the view start is invoked the first thing before other views are invoked. And this sets the layout property to the layout.cshtml.
Okay.
And
just
next
say
thing
it. Sorry.
To layout.shhtml.
Okay, so we replaced all those nasty code nuggets with really clean @ symbol, and then to create multiple statements, we have these braces. And this is just normal C# code.
Gotcha. So now you can just code. That's awesome. Because honestly, that was the one thing that did kind of concern me. Because from where I stand, I'm still trying to get into coding C# on a much more regular basis, and it's already a lot to take in. So I don't want to have to stop and remember to put in %signs around every single line of code that I'm working on.
Exactly. It's so much cleaner. And when you see the model stuff, Jason, you're going to love this. Watch this. Let me create an index controller. And delete all this stuff. And delete that, because that's annoying. Get every worked up. And then we're going to just rename this ViewModels. And then we're going to create. And you'll notice that there is more time up front to do things with MVC.
I believe you're not using Alt Insert, but
Me neither. I was talking. I'm sorry. You'll notice that there's a lot more typing to do the same amount of stuff. However, the benefits and flexibility and maintainability are absolutely huge. And do you recognize that at all, Jason, at this point?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Okay.
It just now looks like such a cleaner distinction between C# and HTML.
Do you mean ASP.NET MVC in general, or specifically Razer?
No, with Razer, it just cleans up the whole look a lot.
No. Razer is a way faster. I wasn't talking about Razer when I was talking a second ago. I was talking about ASP.NET MVC in general.
Oh,
Razer's much faster.
Well, I'm still kind of caught on Razer right now, since that's what you're demonstrating, and I really like how it's just cleaned up the whole look.
Yep. And I'm just going to create a blank page, delete everything, and you'll notice in my layout we have a call to render body, and that's equivalent to the master thingy. So everything in here will be stuck, or everything in here will be stuck where that render body is located. Now, how do I add a strongly typed model? Well, first I have to add that namespace first, so it'll be a little bit cleaner. MVC Application 2.ViewModels. And then we go back into our file, model. Okay, next thing, the tooling for Razer is very buggy. It was new as of the RC. This is the first release where it was actually available. It's buggy and it is slow. And to be honest, I actually disabled it when I was working on a larger project. I just used the normal HTML stuff because it just got so slow and buggy. But they will clean this up. This is a first-class citizen of the ASP.NET MVC. I don't know what a family, I guess you could say. So now we'll do index_index, and we don't see it probably because we didn't do a recompile. Now we should see index_index, or we don't. Okay, fine. Let me view models. View models, and there's an entire possibility that it's actually the tooling itself that's screwing up here.
Okay.
So just letting you know that it might not be entirely my fault. But I'm actually...
But we're going to blame it on you anyway, so don't worry about it.
Yeah, totally your fault, man. Sorry.
We're going to add this to the pages guy, because I could have sworn that it actually used this guy. And the reason I don't know is because I've only set up one application so far with Razer, and that's the big application I've been using for the last 2 weeks, or writing for the last 2 weeks. So I only had to add that web.config once. And now we should, whatever. We'll just see if we get a runtime error, which we can see right now. So let's launch this guy. And by launching that, Control F5 will get a new development server. So if you can just get that guy on the clipboard.
Hang on. Well, almost you stole my mouse back away. That was pretty funny. All right. It's on clipboard.
Okay.
Should paste. It should be a picture of kitties or something.
Oh, that'd be awesome. Like a kitten wearing boxing gloves or something. Idnex is where it's at.
Yeah, we do get a compiler error. And if we look at the compilation source, this is another cool thing. Razer also compiles into C#, but it does so in actually a lot cleaner way. Razer is so decoupled from ASP.NET, you can use Razer to print anything. Like, think about emails, sending emails with Razer, or a console application that doesn't even print HTML, but it still uses Razer as a DSL for some certain instances. Razer is incredibly flexible, and you see all these usings that came up here, and obviously the one I added is not included because it should go in the other.
Yeah, try moving it out of pages and back up to Razer.
This is also the first release where you could actually do this in the web.config. Previously, there was a magical public static method that you called that you had to do, and then this new release added the feature, and this should be, okay. So it does go in the Razer one. I just got confused really quickly on that guy. Okay, so now we have the model index, and we can.
You had it right to begin with. You just wasn't getting the feedback that you were expecting.
In part, is the tooling is a little bit weird.
Yeah.
So now we do a model. We access the property model, and we get dot. And of course, because the tooling doesn't. Okay, just to get tooling to show how awesome this is, I'm going to type this out myself. Okay, there we go. Now we should get a nice little model. Yep. Just so much cleaner to type like this. Like, you have no idea. Well, I mean, I think it's, I don't know.
Starting to become pretty apparent.
Yeah, I'm not passing anything into my view model right now, so it's obviously blank. We'll rebuild there because we added the controller. Now we get that.
Very
so,
cool.
Yeah, and like for each loop.
Nice.
Yeah, for sure.
There are. We'll go over Razer in depth in a little, and hopefully soon. But there are some things that you have to take into account. You have to know how it kind of decides what's HTML and what's CSS. But the rules are pretty straightforward.
Gotcha.
Very cool.
That's awesome.
So
just to get that big picture nice and clear for this this app that you put together, go ahead and walk back through the classes that you add added in the connections between these guys, the relationships between them.
You mean for like the control and the ViewModel and stuff?
Mm-hmm. For this little app here.
So we see that we have an index controller, and we know that this is going to be invoked because our route says match controller / literal / then match action. And even though the default controller in this case is home, in our website or in our URL, we're overriding it with index.
Mm-hmm.
If we were to take this out, we would get a 404 because it would default to home, but there's no home controller.
Right.
Gotcha.
So let's go back to index. And then, so that figures out which controller and which action pair to invoke. Instantiates this controller. And an important thing to know is you can actually perform more than one request inside of a single request, which is really awesome and becomes very useful. ASP.NET MVC will reinstantiate your controller for every action it calls on it inside the lifecycle of a request. Just kind of a little thing to know about how it instantiates or the lifetime of this. Then it invokes this based off the action. Remember that any action is a public action, a public method that returns an action result on the controller. Then we return a view. View is a function on controller that returns a special action result, which by convention looks for a view for under the views folder with the controller name and then the action name. And then inside of that, we're passing in an object. And this object represents the contract between the controller action and the view. So we can add, it's really flexible to do it this way, and we also get static type checking. And that is defined in our ViewModels folder with the text and the header.
Mm-hmm.
Then after that, what actually happens is it goes into the view start. So now the view engine is when you call view, it doesn't actually invoke the view engine just yet. But when it invokes the action result of an action result that was created with the view function, then ASP.NET MVC creates the view engine. And we go into viewStart.cshtml, which sets the layout. And currently that's our shared layout. And then we render the layout. So that'll render this up to here. And then it'll hit a render body, and it'll go back into our custom view.
Gotcha.
Dump all this in, jump back out into the layout, and finish rendering. You want to see something really cool? Really fast?
Of course.
I don't know. Let's pretend like don't shoot me. I totally forgot to set a render section. There we go. Actually, I don't think I need those guys. And then I'm actually going to make this more apparent that it's inside the sidebar. Then rebuild. I don't think we made any changes, but let's have it. Then refresh.
Wow.
So we call a render section in our layout, and then that will search for whatever these guys are in this view and only print out this.
Why'd you call it left?
Because I was kind of actually, because that's most commonly what you do, so let's just do this just for the fun of it, I guess. There we go.
Gotcha. Okay.
Should I maybe introduce recursion into this right now? Because there's actually something really cool that you could do.
All right, we'll give you 5 minutes. This will be a 5 minute bonus.
Okay. Let's say that this is so much fun. You'll like this, Jason. This is a serious advantage. I'm going to break convention. I'm going to type a tree. So this would normally be in your model, but I'm not going to create a model folder because I'm lazy. Verbal tree. I actually did this when I was working on that project I was telling you about, where I implemented an n-tier catalog, meaning that categories can inherit or can be nested under categories and so on and so on. Let's break this guy out. So this would normally come from the database again. We're just cheating. Then we'll say tree equals new tree. Title equals node 1. Children equals new, or rather, that. This syntax is going to look kind of funky, but it's not really necessarily important right now. And this is as far as I'll go, but imagine this goes on forever, or a reasonable amount. But this pattern, or this use case, is very, very common in programming, or in working with web development, and it's so easy and elegant to do in Razer. And what we do is we write what's called a helper inside of Razer. And don't confuse this with helpers. These are Razer helpers.
Okay.
And the helper, imagine helper is a static function that gets put on top of the generated class.
Okay.
So this is the function, this is the function name, and these are the function arguments. Actually, hold on. The IEnumerable can be null, so I'm going to have to say if tree.children does not equal null, then for each var child in tree.children, not really reading what I'm typing, but it looks like I have a syntax error somewhere. And that's one of the funky things about Razer that you have to get used to. When you start inside of a C# nugget, you don't have to repeatedly say @ symbol. So that's kind of... so now we're going to call it this again with child. And we need a UL at the top of this. So these are little helpers that you can define in, and the number one use case that I've seen for these helper guys is specifically for trees. And of course that now has to have that. And we compile and render. And we get an error because this is actually C# code now. And we need to do that. So now we get a 1. And the reason we get a 1 is because...
title equals 1 back there?
No, we're not getting our children really quickly. And you see any mistake in my code, Jason? Oh, I know why. Because I'm going backwards. Hold on. Let me fix this really fast. I started an example. I have to fix it real fast. But I just want to express, though, that this particular... no, we want to keep that. End li. So we need to... There we go. This should work. Do you see any problems with this, Jason?
No, not right off.
One UL, it's just not looping through, and it's not printing child and tree.children. Meh.
No, let's keep looking. We're not going to say meh.
Okay, so this is, as far as I can tell, completely valid. It's getting to this point right here, and I think it could be calling this again, but it's just not printing it. So I might need to do response.write. I swear I didn't have to do this on my existing project, but maybe I do. And we get an error, and we get Firebug in the way of the error. Violation error. Object reference. Oh, that's because, remember, this is a static method. This doesn't have access to all of the properties of this. So we'll do HTML or HTTP context.current.response.write. And we still get 1.
Wait.
But look up at the top.
Look up at the top.
Oh. How did those guys get there?
I'll get it for you.
Oh, yeah, because... Okay. This is something that this is another pitfall of Razer. And the pitfall is this code is being deferred executed, I guess you could say. So when I say response.write, it's writing it when it's executed, but the results of this is stored into another variable that's printed after. So I think what I have to do is I have to use the text guide. I think actually this might have been what I did before, and then rewrap that in a little nugget. Yep.
There we go. Like I said, your code looked good as far as the C# stuff goes, but when we get into all of the tags and all,
formatting.
This is new to me.
The reason you need text is a Razer thing, and it says start printing stuff. Essentially what it says, ignore the fact that the next bit of code looks like C#, print it instead. So I'm going into text mode, and then I'm going immediately back into C# mode. And I think this might be a bug, to be honest with you, because you would expect that to kind of, oh, I'm an idiot. Look at this closely, Jason. Good. This is C# code. Look at what it returns. A helper result. That helper result's never being printed back into the stream. It's not being generated. And then, so when I do this, when I wrap it in a text, it's instructing the Razer compiler to start doing its magical response.write stuff. And then when I'm going back into HTML or C#, it's saying start doing the C# code and print the results to this text thingy inside this.
Is it because we broke out and then back in that you don't have to have a terminator right after the render child?
Exactly. Or it should be. For some reason now I'm getting an error.
If the terminator fixes it, that'll be great.
No, it's not the terminator, because this is not an expression. Or it should be, at least in theory. And expressions don't need terminators. Okay, there we go. Because this is an expression. If I were to do this, actually, this would be valid. I would just get a semicolon. Right there.
Nice.
And,
very cool.
God, this will, I don't even have to say words for this.
Because it's that awesome. It's legendary.
Yeah.
Multi-token expressions are wrapped in parentheses. So you see, if I didn't wrap this in a parenthesis, it would print this expression, and then it would just go back to HTML.
Gotcha.
With the with the parens, it does that. Okay. So yeah, I can continue to talk about MVC, but obviously we need to have a limit on the size of this video.
It's a nice 2-hour video.
Yeah, this is a chunk.
But it's I don't know, this has been an awesome introduction where we originally set out to spend, 10 minutes talking about it and then 5 minutes installing it, and pretty much that was it.
Oh, I knew we were going in because Nelson started the whole thing off. I'd like to do a short video over ASP.NET and MVC, and it's like, you said those words. You said short video. And I just put my head down, and now here we are a couple hours later.
Yeah. So, I don't know. I've got a good feel for just what, ASP.NET, Web Forms, and MVC, well, MVC3 in this case, are.
The purpose has been laid out really nicely. This does seem like the kind of video that you'd probably want to jump around and review different parts of, especially because so many different things were introduced. The base level of ASP.NET, going into WinForms, going into MVC.
Yeah, discussing those two frameworks. I really, really like MVC. I see why you like it as well. I just like the whole way it's all laid out.
I imagine any C# coder really would.
It's pretty slick.
But again, views should be anemic. Really, the meat of your application will always go in your model, which will just be invoked here. So we didn't even touch the most important part, which we'll definitely get into. I mean, as the series continues, that's pretty much the next step, is to talk about the model.
So yeah, I guess here coming up in the next day or two, we'll start on the next web development with ASP.NET, and we'll start building some stuff, Nelson?
Yeah. Once we introduce the model, we can actually, well, perform logic.
And then we got to have one video that's dedicated to Firebug.
Yeah, definitely.
Talking about all of the different features.
And that'll be a short video.
Oh, yeah, real short. Fantastic. All right, well, we will go ahead and wrap this up because I know it's been a very long one, but it's been a lot of fun. It's been very educational. Nelson, I really appreciate your time for showing all of this. Zach, you too, for sticking it out. And anything else either of you would like to add?
No, it's been my pleasure.
No.
Okie doke. Well, thank you very much, and that will wrap up this video. Bye, guys.